Um, okay, so let me open up with the agency slide that I'm super excited. I'm actually starting at the end just like yesterday because I like to do that. So start with the end in mind. Isn't that Stephen Covey? Okay, so
Yep.
how can that be bad? Okay, so this book, like my life, has had an evolution. Okay. Like sustaining impact was my work around what is missing from change theories. Okay. And then detached from drama was actually, I'm going to call it a pleading from leaders to say, what can we do about emotional contagion in an organizational setting? But what can we do about emotional contagion personally? And that's how we came up with the pause model. And yesterday I talked about how the pause model has just gone like wildfire across an organization I'm working in. Agency without anger started out as I didn't start it because I was like, people do things and say things to others, including me, and then I bite my tongue because I will probably say something angry or inappropriate. And so I just suppress. But at the same time, I didn't start it. So then I said, okay, what's really going on here? Okay. And so I've gotten some feedback that putting anger in the title is a little bit messy. And I'm like, no, it is not messy because that is exactly what we feel when our boundaries are crossed. And we have to help people be okay with feeling it and find a way to express it and get it out of their system. Because over the last couple of years, I've really done a deep dive into polyvagal theory, which is simply fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, it's the actual mechanism that describes what's going on with our body when we're under stress. And when we're angry, that is an agitation that is really bad for our bodies. So I was like, no, I'm leaving agency without anger in it because we can have agency without allowing ourselves to get to the point of anger, or we can express our anger someplace else and then express our agency. So there's a lot in here. But then I added a comment, or I added a subtitle of the voice and responsible power. So when we're angry, we can express through voice and responsible power. So that's the beginning and it's the end. Because once we have our agency back, we have to be sure we don't do that recruitment stuff that we're going to talk about today. So, power at the beginning to be able to think about what creates my own agency, and power at the end to make sure I don't do some of these things we're going to talk about as with regards to actors. So, the next slide talks about the reason we left anger in the title is that we wanted to make sure that we can't wait until we are in a state that makes it a control of our emotions. Because if we're putting all of our energy into controlling our emotions, then it still leaks out other places. And so when we come across as angry, nobody listens. And that's the message about agency without anger is if you're trying to have a voice, but it always comes out as anger, people stop listening. And then they blame you. And we're going to talk about all those people. And that was the thing of it was supposed to be, I didn't start it. It was supposed to be an airport book that was like 100 pages and it was supposed to be funny and it was supposed to be all these stories of people that do bad things. I still have stories of people that cross boundaries, but not quite as bad. So the next slide is Anger isn't the beginning of the story. It's really the culmination of the story because we don't lose our agency all at once. It happens quickly and quietly. A boundary is crossed and we're feeling it. And there are minor and major actors. We're going to talk about major actors today, which I'm going to call recruiters. I love that term, that they're recruiting us into their pattern, and we're just going right into it. When a value feels threatened, our nervous system reacts. And this is where I really have so much compassion for what is happening to individuals, because once that nervous system reacts, we talked about this yesterday when we were talking about drama, once we have an amygdala attack where our emotions are just vibrating in our whole body, it shuts down the hippocampus. And that's our fact checker. So if you want to not be angry when you talk, you can't be in an emotional state. So we have to learn how to bring that pause in. So, and stop that nervous system reaction. Because, as we talked about yesterday, we bring it back to meaning. The reason we're angry is because it violated some aspect of how we make meaning in our world. And the emotions go stronger. And now we really have a story. And this is where we get a little bit into drama. Now that we have the story, we got to go tell somebody. But we keep that loop going. This is the connection between agency and drama, is that if we want to have agency, we cannot be connected into emotional contagion, because when we're in emotional contagion, we run around and find people tell us, yeah, you should feel bad. Okay. What we really want to do is bring that energy down so we can have a conversation. So what was once a point of data now becomes a point of anger. So by the time others see our anger, we've already lost our agency and they're going to blow us off. So before anger becomes visible, I just said that our nervous system has already responded. Before we speak, our brain has already decided what is happening here. And before we react, we've concluded what the situation means, why it happened, and who's responsible. And so we're off to the races. So we have to be able to do some interrupting what's going on with this pattern around agency. Agency is found in learning to recognize those moments before they go into automatic reactions. So, anger is not the problem. This work does not ask you to suppress anger. Nope. Nor does it encourage expressing every feeling the moment it appears. What do you want to do with it? And that's why we can put the pause model in agency, because we can stop and say, what's happening and what do I want to do with it? So we're asking a different question. What is the anger trying to tell me? What is going on for me? Where do I feel powerless? Is it, if anger is boundary intelligence, what boundary was touched? If value feels threatened, what value is now being up for excavation? What needs my attention? So when anger becomes information rather than how we need to act, we now can choose. So what's the information telling us? So agency is not the absence. I'm not going to say that after you start learning some of these tools and techniques, you won't be angry anymore, because you're going to be angry. But you're going to have a different perspective of what to do with it. So how do you remain connected while emotion is going on? We recognize the signal. We examine the story. We understand what boundary felt crossed to us. And we choose our response deliberately rather than automatically. So we pause and we reclaim our agency. So anger is neutral. It's not a character flaw, and it's not a command to attack. And this is where we really have to shift our beliefs, okay? Anger is just a dashboard light that's flashing, okay? And so when we moralize anger, we are trying to control other people. Don't be angry. Many of us grew up with at least one parent that says, don't get upset about that. Don't be angry. grow a thicker skin, which you heard yesterday is one of my big hot buttons, okay? Because that's just telling people to suppress it. So now we're working with all people to say, what's the diagnostic information? So how do we move forward without suppressing or exploding? And how do we use data as a boundary, a core value, or an unmet need that needs protection? Don't worry about the light. Look under the hood and ask yourself what's going on. So what's the reaction? It looks similar to the drama cycle. The drama cycle has a trigger, and anger has a trigger as well. The anatomy of the reaction for agency has a trigger. So what happens is you experience the trigger. Again, a value, a boundary, an unmet need is happening. And so you have the trigger, and then system one fires. System one thinking is, this is event action. Okay, system one, clear it up, take action. Okay, but the gap is our ability to slow down with like the pause. The pause is actually system two thinking, where that window can open in between what you're experiencing and how you respond. And this is really about the gap between the actual connection and the reaction, okay? And that's where our power is, from the flash and to doing something about it. That is our power. That's what Viktor Frankl says, and it's milliseconds. When I teach this and I drag it on and on and on, like it sounds like it's going to take forever to get to that gap. It's milliseconds. And that's the only place the power is to be able to slow it down. Now, here's what I think differentiates this work from much of the work that's available, is that we have patterns. We have patterns in us that match to the pattern of the recruiter. So the recruiter is recruiting us through our patterns, and sometimes they know about our patterns and sometimes they don't, but there is a match, okay? A meaning making does the rest. So I have a client. I'm going to talk about this client she has a perfectionistic, I actually have two clients. I was talking yesterday to a new one who has a perfectionistic match, okay? And so perfection is, I'm not enough, okay? So I'm not enough. So I run around and find recruiters who like to tell people they're not enough. They like to do analysis of what's going on with the other person. So over the weekend, I was cleaning out files and some things from my attic that included pieces and parts of my life from my mom and dad's house. And I pulled out a 6th grade report card, okay? And at the end of 6th grade, I had all A's, okay? So I know you're not shocked by that, but this is what's shocking. What was checked on my report card was I got a minus for this, okay? And that is does not work up to ability, okay? So how do you tell someone who has all A's in school, Cheryl, and at the same time tell them they're not working up to their ability? How is that possible? How does that make sense? Okay. So then to make it even better, that I got a bunch of minuses on expresses thoughts well in written work. Okay. So instead of, I don't ever remember having a conversation about how to get my written work better, but that stayed with me till I got into my doctoral program, that I couldn't write. And so now there's the perfectionist thing that goes on inside of me when people are critical, because it goes back to this ghost pattern that I react to it. And so when we react to the pattern that somebody's bringing, we have to remember it's a pattern, not good or bad, and go, oh, hello, there's my pattern showing up. Okay. We have to look like it's normal to have patterns and that patterns will show up. And that's how they match. And then in the past, as we're working with people, and maybe some of this work you're doing yourself, we self abandon because the person is in authority. We want to please. We overfunction to make them see we are worthy and that I am good enough. Or we vacate and go into attack mode and pay back what's going on. So we claiming our agency as we go through these 5 moments, and they are moments, is to stay present and go, oh, there you are. That little pattern is showing up again. So we just talked about the system 1, fast, defensive, fires automatically, sarcastic, puts them back on their heels. The flash fires long before system 2 comes online. When system 2 comes online, we won't need time. We need deliberate thinking in order to engage, to assess what's really going on. And that's where the pause model works. Not why am I angry? What's going on? If we could teach every little child to ask themselves, what's going on? Just what's going on? Can you think of what a better world we would have if we all stopped to say, what's going on and what's trying to draw my attention right now? So we just talked about the matching pattern. The meaning making is where the pattern matching works. Like if I don't have a problem with bullies and somebody starts bullying me, I can laugh at it. But there are people that have been truly bullied. And when that pattern match happens, it's distressing. And if you've been bullied, you're going to self-abandon because it's the only safety place you really have. So we vacate the premises and we move away. So what protected you before no longer protects you as we talk about this new information, because in this new information is the story and who does it belong to? So this is my favorite piece because I'm starting to talk about the actors. Like the other stuff sets up why we need to think about agency and anger and how they connect and things we can do about it. But here is the invitation. So what I've been working with is the bully who is dominant, like their underlying pattern is dominance. The baiter whose underlying pattern is provocation. The gaslighter who underlying pattern is distortion. The fixer, maybe somebody can relate to this, is about prescribing and helping others see a different way of being. And the martyr, oh my God, the martyr, emotional guilt that they're putting onto us as we interact with them. So the bully is creating coercive force and volatility because we're feeling suppressed. The baiter, oh my God, the baiter is one of my favorites because my brother had this developed into an art form, okay? So there wasn't a day that would go by that my brother wouldn't bait me, okay? So now when I hear baiting, I just go, what is going on here, right? So that it creates an emotional activation. The gaslighter is so hard, is so sad because the gaslighter is actually trying to subvert the other person's reality and telling them what they're thinking isn't real. And this one drives me crazy as a coach. And then the fixer who, and I'm teasing when I say there's people in this room because this true fixer wants to do it for someone. So in the book, I talk about how a father-in-law gives a daughter-in-law who's running a company a whole agenda on how she needs to do her work. That's just to be helpful. I'm just trying to be helpful. No, you're not helpful, okay? Because I want to do it myself. Because when we in that space, we have to surrender our autonomy and exchange choice for approval. Going back to gaslighter, we surrender our mind and our sanity is on trial. And as a high theoretic, oh my God, this just sends me into a spiral that makes it really hard to get back from. But you know me, I'll fight the data any day. So provocation is surrendering your focus, so you get into arguing with that person, and then dominance is fighting back. And then when we talk about the martyr, we're surrendering our boundaries because we're just going to go help that person because maybe they'll stop doing it. Okay. We get a somatic signal every time our boundaries are crossed, our values are crossed, our unmet needs happen, and they create in bully and the dominance hyperarousal. We're like paying attention for who's taking putting pressure on and suppressing us. And then the baiter is relational urgency. Like we're moving forward with, you know, the fact that they're trying to provoke us and we're trying not to be provoked. And then the gaslighter is that sinking gut, that disorientation. And suffocation with the fixer is we feel like powerless, like we can't walk into who we are. And then the martyr, we're just depleted, right? It's like the visceral gut nodding. So these are showing up as somatic signals in our body that we now have identified what's recruiting us, and we can do something about it. A recruiter doesn't just influence what you think. It influences how you organize yourself. Reclaiming agency is not about forcing these 5 actors to change. And actually in the book, there are 10 major and about 6 minor. So, I mean, it's not just limited to these 5. There's more that we look at. It's about recognizing the specific invitation in your body. And I'm not going in that room. As my social work cousin says often, there is crime scene around that. Crime scene tape around what's going on. And I'm not coming in that room. And remaining distant and the sole author of your experience. So what do? What we go back to, I'm not going to take the bait. I'm going to name the pattern. So we have to become familiar with the patterns. We have to become experts at naming them. And then also the core impact awareness. What does the story sound like that we're building when we have that recruitment going on? Oh, you're just like my brother. Oh, I remember this. I know where this is going. And it's from participant to observer. We are no longer participating. We're trying to get in observer mode about what's going on. Because once we say to ourselves, oh, there you are, that's the perfectionistic pattern showing up in my life again. And I'm not going to get into that room. So the mental pause and name. Before you respond, you silently name the recruitment you're facing. And the question is, what is this behavior attempting to recruit in me? My doubt, my guilt, my vigilance, my compliance, my worthiness. What is really going on with that recruitment? So, surprise, we have 3 levels again. First of all, we have to be aware. What's that automatic loop that kicks in us? Then what is the activation we need to do? How do we anchor it into adult data? We're not the 10-year-old that's being teased by our brother. We stand inside our own ground and say, I'm not going in that room, okay? Because that is the baby step that keeps us safe for us to decide what we want to do when the baiter shows up in our life. We steer the energy into our present terrain so that we are interacting from composure, maybe not at the time it shows up, but maybe at a later date. We're making choices. The somatic signal, when your body kicks in, you have to know that that something is happening, and that's when we start asking the question, what is showing up from the matching pattern? What's happening now versus how does this feel like in the past? Naming the recruiter, and we do an early warning signal inventory because we're catching the somatic flash at the 10% mark. What am I feeling? What is happening? Where am I feeling it? Not the 90% explosion. So what part of my response belongs to this room and what part of my response is an echo of the past? I call them ghosts. Okay, we have a lot of ghosts that chase us around and invite the recruiters into our lives. So we anchor in adult data by reclaiming the internal baseline, feet on the floor, breath, reference point intact. Breathing really helps us get through some of this action that's happening. Refusing the triangulation. I'm not going in that room. Sorting fact from meaning making. Okay, what's the story we're telling? What was really going on here? What do I want to do with this? Is there a way I could look at this from a different perspective that will help me control my emotions, or that will help me look at my emotions of what I'm feeling differently? And I talk a lot of times about this when I think about the workplace. Okay. So most people have authority issues because one or both parents or teachers or a religious figure was suppressive when it comes to agency. Okay. So when a boss cannot figure out what's going on, it's probably something that's tied to a ghost. Okay. I'm working with a client right now, and she's a high level leader in an organization. And one of her direct reports keeps saying he's afraid he's disappointing her, and that it's keeping him up at night. It's stressing him out. And that is not hers. That is something that he is bringing forward, one of his ghosts from the past. Somebody made a big impression on him about how not to disappoint. And so when he is not when he's meeting his own self-worth and his own inner perfectionist, he feels like he's disappointing his leader. The leader is not disappointed. So we have to start thinking about how we work with people. My recommendation was to ask him to either do some therapy or work with their employee assistance program, because this is deep and he needs to get to the point of, this is something he keeps carrying through, and how is he going to stop that story of disappointment? So what was actually said or done versus what story am I telling myself and why? So we steer the energy into the present terrain. What's really going on? The strategic choice. What's the choice I want to make that leads to outcomes that I want for long term? And not just, I get it out, okay? I get to stress out and I get to yell at someone. So the generative action. Generative means we're building capacity. So what the generative action is: clear boundaries, definitive action without lingering resentment. And so here's a question. What is the cost benefit? What does this cost my long-term agency? And what actually moves and advances my position? So the question becomes, what action serves my core objective, not just my immediate comfort? So where do we start? Notice the flash, name the pattern, name the recruiter. What is being recruited in right now? Choose where you want to stand. Agency with anger doesn't mean we stop feeling. It means we're able to catch ourselves to stay present long enough to make the choice that serves us. So wrapping up, we're doing an, agency. Yes, I got it right. I changed it. Okay. Agency is on Thursdays. Okay. So we're doing master classes. We're not doing a program with it yet. We're doing master classes that start at 11 a.m. Eastern. Okay. So this is one of those classes where South Africa is getting a benefit, because now we're talking with you at, if it's 8 o'clock, 5 o'clock your time, to talk about these 3 master classes that are going on. As we talked yesterday, if you want to take the master classes and you want to take all 3, but you don't want to sign up in August because you know you're going to miss the 27th. If you miss the 27th, you can come back on the 17th of September rather, and take it. So we are allowing people with master classes, because we're offering them monthly, to pick and choose what month they want to take a masterclass. And so you could start in August and take masterclass 1, in September take masterclass 2, in October take masterclass 3. So you don't have to take them all at once. You can take them one at a time. And that's how we're building it, so that you have the opportunity to find the best position that you want in terms of how you want to increase your growth and development and your learning. So I'm going to ask you what you think. Vessel, what do you think about this book?
I love this. And I was just
Why?
thinking, yeah, no, I was thinking to myself, no, this is relevant to so many of us. We all struggle with all these things. And I don't like it when you point finger at me.
We do, don't we?
No, no, but I was thinking about it as well, Peggy. You could just as well have spoken about stress as well. Hey, anger, stress. Why do I stress? You know, and what are the triggers? And what is the story I'm telling myself? You know, I was at the university today speaking to their leaders, and the person says, "Yeah, but we are under so much stress." You've got a choice. It's a trigger. What are you going to do about it? Okay, it's not a question. Sorry.
No, that's okay, because I want to know your thinking on how this is coming together. Does it make sense? Can you see
Does
the
make sense.
recruitment pattern and how we have to have a pattern that matches or it won't bother us? But if we have a pattern that matches, it sends us into orbit. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to just do a check. I know. What do you think?
Yes, I was
Peggy.
just thinking, sorry, Cheryl. I was just thinking how actually practical it is and but how difficult at the same time for an individual. Because much as it looks so very practical when you present it, if I just think of myself and how but I'm really trying to live very intentional ever since I've started with the coaching programs. Yeah, but it's not always easy and yeah, but very helpful and it makes sense and I like how the three books actually all go to the um, three things: the awareness, the alignment and the actions and all the things, the activation. So yeah, a constant work in progress
You know, if you
from where
think
I'm
I've got
sitting.
this mastered, you're crazy. Okay. Like I'm writing from my heart. I'm
Yeah,
writing
yeah.
because I do some of these things,
Because we
right?
do these things, yes,
Yep.
yes. But yeah, but it makes perfect sense because there's so many ghosts that's chasing us and that we sometimes just push away and then when it's too late they come and stand in front of you.
And wave
Yeah,
to us. They
yeah.
wave to us. Cheryl,
Yeah.
what were you about to say?
I I was just, it was so interesting the labels that you gave, Peggy. So I was wondering, the bully, the beta, the gaslighter, the fixer, the martyr. I originally had thought of them as separate people with their own patterns. But actually, if somebody really wants to get to you, they can employ all of the above.
Yes.
And so it really, the pause model really helps, not again, not that I've perfected it, but I really, the I think it's really important to pay attention to oneself. And so often we rush through the day. So it's in a kind of what you were saying, being intentional about some stuff. You can't be intentional if you're not thinking about that. And it's very easy. I don't know, Peggy, do you have a magic wand to make it work better?
I have a magic wand in my mind, but you brought up one of the conundrums of the actors because sometimes actors do two or three of these things at the same time. So a bully can be a gaslighter they can be using gaslighting to insert their dominance. And so we might be feeling both self-doubt and feeling dominance. And so, the important part is not how many of these recruitment patterns people can push into their personality, but what is going on for me? Okay. Which one is hitting the hardest for me? And what do I want to do with it? How do I want to approach it? Okay. Because it becomes, in some cases, very existential. The perfectionist isn't on here yet. The know-it-all isn't on here yet. The cynic isn't on here yet. So we're going to build out, well, I'm going to build out, at least 10 of the actors, but then also the minor actors, like people driving. And Cheryl, you and Vessel can remember the person on the plane when I came to South Africa who kept pushing my headset, and those are minor actors, but those are people that we lose our agency to because we don't want to make a big stink because we're on a plane. But those things happen all the time. So how do we give people voice? Could have I gotten up and said gently, I don't think you know this, but when you hit the button, you're hitting my head. It's my head's going forward every time you press. But I didn't have the courage to do it because we were on a plane and we are back where there were at least 60, 80 people. And so there are things that hold us back. And so I don't have it perfected either. I just feel like if we can announce what's recruiting us, then how do we handle it? How do we handle it differently if we recognize the recruitment? Cheryl.
Mm-hmm. And another thing, it's what I recruit. I've just realized, in reviewing today, I was talking about somebody whose narrative is really damaging because of how they've perceived things. And then just in my conversation with another person afterwards was I the gaslighter? And it's very easy for the older generation when you talk to younger people, it's like, really, you're catastrophizing this. It's very easy nowadays to do that. So it's helpful, thank you, for me to be aware of these labels because I need to also not be the recruiter in somebody else's life.
That is the end chapter. Now that we've talked about how people recruit you, do any of these patterns show up for you as you are recruiting others? And there's a lot of conundrums in here because what you just talked about is worldview. And if I'm insisting that you believe my worldview, I potentially could be gaslighting. But if I'm just sharing, there could be two ways to look at this, and you get to choose the way you want to look at it. I'm giving you agency to choose the way you want to look at it, but I'm bringing up a potential different way of looking at it. That's not gaslighting. That's just suggesting there are more than one ways to look at it, but it's a narrow line when we're talking about worldviews, and we have to be really careful because most people, particularly in leaders and organizations, it becomes very difficult for other people to have worldviews, particularly when they stand on the line of whether they're in alignment with the organizational objectives and values. And so, like when we enforce standards, that is not gaslighting. This is where we are, but we have to be able to play in both worlds. And it's a little bit messy.
It is.
Geraldine, Terrence, any questions, anything you want to add?
Okay, well, let me turn on video and sound. I'm also in South Africa, Peggy, and I was invited to attend by Gail Mervis, who is a friend of mine. And I am not a coach. I'm not a qualified coach, but I am a teacher and I have a major in psychology, and I've studied a methodology called PRH. I don't know if you've heard of PRH.
I haven't.
It is a methodology of understanding human emotions with respect to oneself and with respect to others. It stands in French. It stands for Personnalité et Relations Humaines, Personality and Human Relations, and it's based on Carl Rogers' work. So I've spent 20 years doing modules in that. And what I picked up today is what you're talking about is what he calls the DRR, which is an acronym for the disproportionate recurring reaction. And you have it because of the ghosts and because of what happened in your past. And then you morph what's going on in the present with the past, and then you have that huge spike. So I've been very intrigued hearing how you call all these things, and also how to deal with them. So I feel very privileged, and thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad you could join us, Geraldine, and always, we'll keep you on our list so that you can keep attending. So that's awesome.
Okay, thank you. Yes, hi.
Just remember, just remember to put your email address on the chat so that we can add you.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Vessel. I'll do that.
Terrence, anything you want to add?
Yeah, thank you. What a pleasure. Sorry, I'm always off video when I'm on the road because, I know what it's like. So I think for me, let me just come off the video. I think for me, I was once in an environment where there was a philosophy that we drove, and I think based on people like to bring into the organization people that are very similar to them. And we used to say A players recruit A players and B players recruit B players, which I suppose worked well, but in some instances not. Because the trick here is if I'm a certain behavioral pattern and it's my natural preference, and I tend to want to bring people close to me that are quite similar or that maybe share that particular pattern, I lose so much because the world is just so much bigger. And the secret is always to basically having to learn all of it so you understand, so that you can actually understand the benefit from each one of them. Because there's always a room or a benefit from any one of these behavioral patterns. It's the same thing with worldviews. You're just talking about worldviews. At the end of the day, those that really benefit the most are those that are able to embrace multiple perspectives or multiple views, even though they might have their own view. But the understanding, the deep understanding of the rest of all other views or worldviews enriches your own world as well. So I think it's always about that trick to have to balance between yours and the rest and your understanding of the rest so that you can enrich yourself.
Yeah, and I think that was a really good way of summarizing the messy part of worldviews versus people that intentionally steal someone's agency. Okay. And I mean that in a compassionate way. Many people don't know they're doing it. Okay. I've been with friends that have tried to describe my identity different from how I'm experiencing my identity. And I go, no, that's not my identity. That's not how I'm experiencing it. And they're like, yeah, but you do this. And I'm like, but that doesn't make it my identity. Okay. And so being able to speak up when we feel like, the meaning being made isn't the accurate one about us, that was not mean spirited, but it was intentional to shift me into believing what they were believing. And so that's the conundrum, the messiness of the worldviews coming together and allowing a person to have a worldview that isn't ours, but still having compassion and, the intention to build relationship with them. And I think that's the challenge when it comes to worldviews. But some of these people are actually coming from an intentional way of being that they learned as children and they keep doing it. So, questions? Anything you want to add before we close? We've got another webinar coming up in about 12 minutes. But is there anything you want to add to what we've been talking about? Any questions? You know where I am. You just reach out if you have questions. And this book is in the final writing, and then I'll be editing it all through September. And hopefully I'll have it ready for full view the beginning of November and actually print it in South Africa. So we'll be bringing the book to South Africa to introduce it. Thank you so much for coming today and spending time with me. And those of you that spent yesterday with me, I am so appreciative of all the good feelings I feel when I'm with you all. And Geraldine, welcome. Please join us whenever you have the opportunity.
Many thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.